So we have some reviews to cover then between now and 4 o'clock, and we'll do Men in Black, shall we? Men in Black 3?
Men in Black 3.
Should we start there?
Yes.
This is a very long time ago, Men in Black.
Yeah, when Men in Black started, you and I were at Radio 1, so that was back in the late 90s. And then
19th century, wasn't it?
That's right. And then there was Men in Black 2, which I think was 2002, and now this, which is, a decade later. The funny thing about Men in Black, this is the entire series seems to be about Tommy Lee Jones attempting to leave. It's the whole thing in the first one that Will Smith is recruited, and at the end of it, Tommy Lee Jones gets, vaporized. He gets the neuralizer, wipes his brain. So he goes off, and there's a suggestion at the end of the first one that Linda Fiorentino then will become the new Men in Black agent. Then you have Men in Black 2, in which they have to go and get him back. He's working in a post office or something, and then they have to remind him that he was a Men in Black because they've decided to make a sequel. So they have to get him out of retirement and unneuralize him and put him back into.
Can you do that? You can neuralize it into reverse.
Apparently you can, so there we go. And so which was peculiar. And then you now have another one in which it seems... I don't exactly know what the contractual background is, but it seems very much like Tommy Lee Jones is there under sufferance. For the very first film came out, Tommy Lee Jones did an interview in which he said, in that fantastic Tommy Lee Jones way, he said, the secret of comedy is to stand as close as possible to Will Smith, so he was kind of casting himself as the fish out of water, that he's not the comedian. He was the straight-faced guy, the grumpy, and that was the character, and then Will Smith did the funny thing. Will Smith is very funny, and also a very likeable screen presence. It's absolutely true. And the first Men in Black was a surprise because we saw it very close to the release. I remember going to, it was now Sony, and they showed it to us. In fact, Barry Sonnenfeld introduced it. It was literally only a few weeks before it was released, and it wasn't quite finished. There was a couple of special effects that hadn't been done. And we all thought, guys, the film's coming out, it's really expensive, we haven't heard about it, therefore it's not going to be any good. And we were really surprised it was really good. Nowadays, of course, it's become totally standard practice that you don't see anything until it really goes. Well, we don't see Prometheus, for example, until a couple of days before it opens. That's no longer anything to do with whether they think it's any good or not. It's just you don't see those films.
See you next week, aren't we?
Yes, exactly, yes. And then it opens just a couple of days later, so you don't get those long lead things. But back then, it was really odd to see a big budget movie like that we really hadn't known anything about, but it was about to open. So then you have Men in Black 2, which is a perfunctory disappointment, and then and they bring back Tommy Lee Jones, but they don't do the Linda Fiorentino thing, which actually would have been a better gag. Now, umpteen years later, the story is they've got Tommy Lee Jones, who clearly is, I imagine, being paid a huge amount of money to be there, but looks all the time like a man on the clock. So therefore, the plot is, okay, we got Will Smith, we got Tommy Lee Jones, but Tommy Lee Jones's old nemesis it has gone back in time into the 60s to kill Tommy Lee Jones's character, the young Agent K. So therefore, Will Smith must time jump, all this from the trailer, to go back to the 1960s to save Agent K, which enables them to have on the poster Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, but actually for most of the movie to have Josh Brolin doing a young Tommy Lee Jones. So you've got the character, he's there on the poster, he's there in the adverts, but for most of the movie he's not in it. For most of the movie it's Will Smith and Josh Brolin. Here's a clip.
Last chance, who are you and what do you know?
I'm an agent of Men in Black, but I'm from the future. We're partners. 25 years from now, you're gonna recruit me, and 14 years after that, the guy you didn't let me kill today at Coney Island, he escapes from prison and jumps back in the past and unleashes a full-scale invasion of Earth. We had about 19 hours to catch him and kill him, so really, we need to go right now.
All right.
So on the positive side, it wasn't as rubbish as I'd expected it to be.
How rubbish did you expect?
Well, having seen Men in Black 2, which was a crushing disappointment, I expected it, and it's 10 years later, and you think, and it does look, I'm sorry about this, it does look like a film that exists as a series of complex contractual arrangements rather than a narrative that was, dreamed, because actually it looked really, really good on the page. But I went in with very low expectations, and they were exceeded. So that is, on the positive side, that is there. Will Smith is funny, although, even Will Smith wasn't funny enough to save Wickedy Wickedy Wild Wild West, which was, of course, a crashing disaster. Josh Brolin is actually very, very good at doing a young Tommy Lee Jones to the extent that I've read interviews when they said some people thought Josh Brolin's voice was dubbed by Tommy Lee Jones. Actually, I thought the same thing. When I saw the trailer for it, you did think, gosh, either he's doing a really good Tommy Lee Jones impression or they have actually got Tommy Lee Jones to come and do it, but apparently they haven't. And then Jermaine Clement from The Flight of the Conchords is chewing up the scenery as his nemesis, although there's this running gag about Boris the animal and him just saying, it's just Boris. See, that's the gag. He's not Boris the animal, which doesn't doesn't really work.
Don't get the gag.
Well, because everyone calls him Boris the animal, but he's not. He's just Boris. Because he's not an animal, he's being disrespected. But he said, well, exactly, that's the point. The gag doesn't quite work.
Well, not the way you told it.
No, well, it doesn't work the way they told it either. Okay. There's also this weird thing that just before Will Smith time jumps back to the 60s, they make a big thing about, hey, it's going to be very different when you get back there because, you know, African-American going back into the 60s, you know, things were very, very... So you think, oh, that's what it's going to be about. And when he gets back to the 60s, there is one gag about somebody thinking he's the valet parker, and then they forget about it. That whole thing goes completely out the window, which is weird, which, as I said, lends more to the idea that this wasn't some kind of organic script. It was a bunch of contractual Lego blocks that were put together. Then it's lovely to say hello to Emma Thompson because Emma Thompson is fabulous, and then sad to say goodbye to her as soon as he does the time jump, because then it goes back to a sort of younger version of it. But so she's gone. So the whole thing feels like this terribly perfunctory exercise in moving building blocks around so that you've got the stars that worked, you've got the special effects, you've got the thing, you've got enough of the gags that you can put in the trailer, and yet at no point does it ever feel coherent. The most disappointing thing about it is that Sonnenfeld, his films have always had personality. You know, he was a cinematographer, worked with the Coens, you know, Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, Miller's Crossing, I think. And his films always felt like they had a distinctive personal stamp, even when they were expensive blockbuster movies. The thing with Men in Black 3 is it feels completely corporate. It doesn't feel like it's got any personality at all. It just feels like a mechanical machine of a movie. Add to that, and I'm sorry to sound like a stuck record, the 3D, you go... and you're going to, oh, I see, the blob's going to fly out the screen of me. And thank you very much. And so it was just like, you remember the thing that was great in the 90s, was a bit rubbish in the noughties, is back now in the, what do we call these now? The teens, the tones, the tones, the teens? It's in the teens.
Well, we're not in the teens.
Better than it was the second time, but now because everything's in 3D, it has to be in 3D. We have got Tommy Lee Jones back. He don't really want to be here. Maybe, or maybe he does. Maybe he was only available for a few days. But it doesn't matter what the actual story is. The fact that you sit there watching the movie thinking, yeah, he's only in it at the beginning and the end not because the narrative demanded it, and you've made a couple of gags about changing politics, but you've completely forgotten about them, and you've put some running gags in, but they don't quite work, and then you've thrown special effects at the screen to hope, on the basis that we won't notice, but we will. And the reason we will notice is this, because Men in Black was a much funnier, much smarter, much stroppier film than anyone had expected it to be. And the surprise of Men in Black ending up being quite as snappy as it was still lives with me. And the fact that the sequels are so perfunctory and so on is completely encapsulated by the constant motif of dragging Tommy Lee Jones back. At the end of the first movie, he was gone. He was gone like a turkey in the corn. And every time you drag him back out again, David Lynch, it's Twin Peaks, every time you drag him back out again, it feels like a franchise being dragged out and dusted off and waved around, you know, for financial benefit.
On
and
that
then
subject,
put back into the...
Tony Keane...